We had a very fruitful day one yesterday, where in the morning during an inaugural session, a lot of the policymakers from the government side regarding about healthcare aspect talked about different aspects and sort of outlined the policy roadmaps regarding healthcare. Then we had two very fruitful panel discussions talking around how technology and especially the newer technologies are being increasingly used in the healthcare sector. Today, we start with one panel discussion, which is a very pertinent topic as of today. So, we are going to talk about innovation and trends in infection prevention in hospitals. While this has always been a critical aspect of healthcare, especially in the last 1.5 years during the pandemic, it has assumed even more significant proportions. So, keeping in mind that we are sure to have a very insightful discussion today, and we are being watched live by about 300 plus viewers, and I'm sure some of the best practices that would emerge out of the discussion today can be successfully applied by even by the audience who are witnessing them in their hospitals and in their healthcare institutions. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce the very eminent set of panel today. Uh, First, we have Dr. V.R. Gupta, Group Medical Director, Sarvodaya Hospital and Research Center, Faridabad. Welcome, Dr. Gupta.
Thank you, sir.
Well, then we have Dr. Dilip Rangarajan, Group Medical Director of NU Hospitals. Welcome, Dr. Rangarajan.
Thank you.
Uh, we have next Dr. Shaktimaya Mahapatra, Group Medical Director of Sahyadri Hospitals. Welcome, Dr. Mahapatra. And we also have Dr. Harish Mathyalagan, Medical Director of Sudha Hospitals. Welcome, Dr. Harish.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And we are going to be joined in a little while by Dr. Shubhra Jyoti Bhaumik, Clinical Director of PLS Hospital and BK Roy Research Center, in about 5 minutes' time. Now, to moderate this very interesting discussion today, I would like to introduce Dr. Deepak Patkar, Director, Medical Services and Head, Department of Imaging, Nanavati Super Specialty Hospital in Mumbai. Welcome, Dr. Patkar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And now I would like to hand it over to Dr. Patkar to take over the show and discuss. And may I request in between when Dr. Bhaumik joins in, if you can just introduce him when he will be joining in about 5 minutes' time. Thank you. And it's over to you, Dr. Patkar.
So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel discussion on innovations and trends in infection prevention and control in hospitals, how it has become an essential part of quality patient care. I would like to welcome our panelists, Dr. Gupta, Group Medical Director of Sarvodaya Hospital, Faridabad, Dr. Dilip Rangarajan, Group Medical Director, NU Hospital, Dr. Shaktimaya Mohapatra, Group Medical Director, Sahyadri Hospitals, Dr. Subhrajyoti Bhaumik, Clinical Director, Fearless Hospital and BK Roy Research Center, and Dr. Harish Mathyalagan, Medical Director, Sudha Hospital. Healthcare associated infection is one of the most common complications of healthcare management. Each year, several lives are lost due to the spread of infection within the hospital and small nursing homes. Hospitals across infections are a serious health hazard, leading to increased patients' morbidity and mortality. It also increases the length of hospital stay, and of course, the costs get mounted associated with the hospital stay. One of the major challenges during the pandemic that was brought into focus was the risk of infection of patients as well as healthcare staff. It disrupted healthcare systems worldwide, with hospitals being overwhelmed due to the increasing patient load, lack of staff, and ideal safety equipment available at that point. Temporary centers, hospitals were being set up to deal with the growing number of patients, which was going out of control. There was a sudden surge in demand for cleaning, disinfection products, PPE kits, due to the growing awareness about hygiene, health, and safety. So I put my first question to this elite panel. The question is, the pandemic was probably the biggest accelerator for promoting innovations and technology for prevention of transmission. I would like to know everyone's thoughts on this. Let me start with Dr. Gupta first. Thank you.
As far as your first question is concerned, I will like to share our experience, what we faced at Sarvodaya Hospital, Faridabad in NCR region. Uh, since our hospital is NABH accredited, so we try to work in those policies so that we are better organized. So first of all, as there were few cases about 1.5 years back in the month of May and June last year, so first we formulated one COVID core committee, and this COVID core committee was formed, and it had few consultants, mainly physician, critical care, and then pulmonologist. And it was supported very well by infection control team, operation team from purchase, so that whatever policy decision was taken in the hospital, this was authenticated by COVID core committee. As Dr. Patkar has already mentioned that there were a lot of challenges faced during that time. So we used to have daily morning and evening briefing work. Like the most first challenge was about the patient movement. So we started to create first isolation ward in our emergency department with all clinical protocols and safety guidelines. Then technologically one flu corner was made, and then separate sample collection was made near the emergency area. After creation of isolation ward in emergency, the other challenge was in OPD. So OPDs were segregated, and then we created a separate intensive based on infection control protocols. Then another practical challenge which developed in 3-4 days was number one, availability of PP masks, PP kits, and other consumables. And second was compliance of staff to this personal protective equipment. So what we have done, because we have got very good collaboration with our suppliers, so in-house we had the basic stuff for our PP, and we stitched according to our requirements. Then when doctor and nurses started using all these PP kits, then there was some problems related to fogging as well as some suffocation. So I am happy to share that with help of our biomedical team, we created some indigenous system with help of some motor mechanism where there was less fog and there was less suffocation for users of PP kit. After a few days, when there were a lot of sick patients were there in ICUs, so naturally there was shortage of ventilator. And for few days, we also tried to combat this shortage with help of connectors. Then like one ventilator was connected to two patients. I mean, this we did only for 3-4 days, but that was very, very successful. So these were the few methods where we could find some help with help of innovation. And as you know, hand hygiene is the most important part of sanitation and infection control measure. So our team developed a in-house method for this hand sensitization and cleaning, with help of sensor-based medical equipment. So these 3-4 technologies helped us to find out some solutions. And as the patients were avoiding to coming to OPDs, then we started doing teleconsultation with help of our IT department. Then for admitted patient in the ICU and in the wards, to communicate about condition of their patients. So we started video chatting with the family members so that they're aware about the condition of the patient. Another thing which we had very good experience, I want to share with the respected panelists, that in those days, the at home increased significantly. And fortunately, we have got a system called hospital in-house, what we call as a hospital, which is hospital services provided at home. So we also reactivated our hospital services so that whatever is required at home, whether it is after we get the prescription from doctor, whether it is in the form of pulse oximeter, whether it is form of some nebulizer, equipment at home. So at that activity also helped us provide better patient care services at home. And I am also thankful that at the same time, there were a lot of guidelines coming from Government of India, and gradually with Prime Minister Atmanirbhar Bharat, we were getting from outside indigenous companies in India. They started making ventilators and other stuff, and we were able to tackle that time after this production started in India. Then other hospitals, like I have seen in one of the hospitals in Vadodara, where some robotic material was used for housekeeping. In fact, I was also a panel member in that presentation. So what did they do? They just take help of robotic and started using housekeeping with that services. And in fact, you might have seen few other hospitals like big corporate hospital, they have taking help of robotic to provide food to the patient and for movement of other stuff from the hospital. So these are in brief about technological innovations, what we faced and what we did during the first COVID wave. So that's all from my side as far as first question is concerned, Dr. Patkar.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Can Dr. Dilip Rangarajan add to what Dr. Gupta said?
Yeah, as Dr. Gupta mentioned, we also formed had a meeting of all the staff nurses, doctors, and infection control committee, and then devised new policies and protocols to handle COVID situation. Right, we have a challenge of protecting patients, protecting our staff from COVID positive patients, etc. So the first thing that we did was the attendance, which we mark for all the staff, which is finger recognition, change the entire thing to face recognition. So there's no touch involved by all the staff of the monitor. So face recognition was implemented throughout all the hospitals. Then we had a data dashboard by the HR team where every day you see from one department, one worker becomes health worker becomes positive. So we could track the thing with the data dashboard as to how many of the hospital employees were infected, who are in home isolation, who are all admitted, who are all sick, who are all not sick, etc. That went a long way to track, isolate, as well as to advise the health workers inside the hospital who are affected with COVID. We had invested a lot in this Massimo monitors, even well prior to the last 3 or 4 years, where we can monitor the patient's pulse oximeter, that is the oxygen saturation, as well as the heart rate at the nursing station. So all the Massimo monitors are connected to a central monitor. So the patients in the COVID ward whom we isolated to first floor and then ground floor, we could monitor their vitals from the nursing station well away from the COVID. So the doctors could monitor the patient's condition remote also instead of going in. Of course, Doctors were going in periodically to examine patients, but 24-hour monitoring for the oxygen saturation was made more effective by Masimo monitoring. Of course, we introduced tele. We have a lot of dialysis patients and transplant patients who are immunosuppressed. So it's a risk for them to come to the hospital. So we introduced a lot of teleconsult so that we could advise them over the video call, and also introduced home lab collection and home pharmacy. So we employed our ambulance driver to deliver pharmacy because the transplant patients require, they cannot be without immunosuppressive drugs. So we earmarked all the transplant patients and sent the pharmacy material home so that they don't miss their drugs. Of course, PPE kits, there's some innovation in PPE kits and N95 masks, which were in demand at that time. So we can't afford to use one N95 mask a day. So devised policy and protocol to ETO sterilize and sterilize the N95 mask about 4 or 5 times so that the N95 mask could be effectively reused. And touch wood, we have not had any problems so far. We always have the CCTV monitoring of hand hygiene for the last 10 years in our hospital. So we effectively use the CCTV monitoring right from the entrance of the hospital to till the COVID ward to see whether all the infection control practices are being followed effectively. These are some of the few technology-based things that we already had, but we implemented it better to monitor things during COVID season. That's all from my side.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Dr. Mohapatra, please. Your views on this? You're muted, sir. Sir, you're muted. Dr. Mohapatra, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. So am I audible? Yeah, thank you very much. And, to all of us, it was a challenge thrown in no time. So we didn't have actually any time to, give a structured decision. COVID was at our doorsteps and we had to act fast. So I was that time last year heading a hospital. It's a university hospital of 1,300 beds. And there was a dictate from the government to start a COVID hospital right away within a week time. So we converted one of our facilities, that is a 6-storied building, and we converted the entire facility to a COVID. So we right away segregated the COVID inflow. Those who are diagnosed and being referred from the COVID care centers or from other from diagnostic labs to sent by the government to the healthcare facility. So it was an entirely different structure for the COVID patients. So that was one innovation that went well. So we could somehow segregate the walk-in COVID patients from the non-COVID patients, walk-in non-COVID patients, and that instilled some sort of a confidence in the staff and also in the patients. So having said that, it was not devoid of other challenges like quickly we need to put in a lot of MGPS lines to supply oxygen to most of these patients. Luckily, we had few ventilator-enabled beds there, so converted those beds into SDU and ICU, and that building also had a gastroenterology suite. So we converted one of the ERCP suite to a OR, and we could conduct almost like 50 to 60 cesarean sections, and we became one of the referral centers for cesarean section in the city of Bhubaneswar and to most part of Odisha. So and then for the diagnostic part, we also saw there's a lot of cross infection from patients because most of them protocols used to do a CT. So we could install a CT within 15 days time. Luckily, we had ordered a CT much before that for our non-COVID side, but then we installed it in the COVID side. And somehow we could segregate many patients, non-symptomatic patients or patients already having a positive RT-PCR or a RAD, not coming to the non-COVID side. So those are the innovations in the COVID side. But for the non-COVID sides, I think managing the non-COVID side was more challenging than managing the COVID side because COVID, means there's no enemy there. But then segregating the suspects in the non-COVID side or patients who are totally asymptomatic coming for elective surgeries, I think we all have faced that. So, so what we did, we had good tires and almost rented few of the RT-PCR machines so that the waiting time doesn't increase for our walk-in patients for the non-COVID procedures, especially the oncology and other things, where we thought that with the time horizon of COVID, nobody knows these patients should not suffer. So I think there was a lot of repurposing of the services. We did have very little research and data available in the last COVID wave. So it is all innovations in the operations, in the billing side, in the MRT, in the caregiving side, at the bedside of the patient. So bringing in new ideas means everybody talk of a core group, and then we put across a command center for COVID there, where also we could reconnect the patient's relatives, because the anxiety level was very high, and everybody who used to get COVID positive, they were scared, as well as the doctors, and treating them. So a lot of education and communication bidirectional was wanted. So we made a command centers where you used to call the patient's relative, tell them the patient status, liaison with the government with regard to especially disposing the COVID bodies. Then coming to the cleaning and disinfection, I think in May 2020, the WHO has an interim guidelines for the disinfection and sterilization, starting from the surface disinfection to deep cleaning and other things. So we all are aware that the gold post and the level of evidence, they keep on changing. So is your disinfection practices. So so those things we keep on innovating, I think, all across the healthcare. So that was from my side for the first questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohapatra. Can Dr. Bhaumik add a few experiences of his own? You've been already introduced, Dr. Bhaumik.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you, and apologies for joining late. There was emergency in the hospital. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And as my previous panelists have said, that a lot of innovation has come, and definitely pandemic has been a catalyst in bringing in changes in the hospitals, which we might not have thought to be brought in for 5 years together. That was done in last 1 year. I'm just going to add few things which I think we also did, like any other hospital in the country who was trying to build the infrastructure at the same time when we were trying to treat patients. So one of the important thing was communication with the architects as well as the ongoing infrastructure development. It was totally online. I think it was a innovative thing which we have never experienced, because usually the people come on site and they construct the wards. This was completely online because people never wanted to come. They were scared of coming into the hospitals. So the technology in terms of the internet has become a way of life, and I think this is going to be this is going to be the norm even after the pandemic gets over. The internet was heavily utilized, as I would say, for the RT-PCR installation, I would say. The NABL accreditation audit, which resulted in the approval of the RT-PCR facility at PLS Hospital, was totally online. And let me tell you, having led that audit, we had a lot of challenges. We have never done physical. We have always been exposed to physical audits. I'm an NABH assessor myself, along with Dr. Gupta. We have done many physical audits, but the experience of doing online audits, of looking at the nuances, what the assessors will ask, was a totally new experience. I think this is a very big learning experience at our hospital. And the other thing has been the increased users of clinical decision support system like UpToDate. We use UpToDate, and we had the numbers increased to more than 25%, where doctors wanted regular updates. So we did have a task force, as other panelists mentioned. There were a group of people who were always on the job trying to understand what is going on in the hospital, how the government of West Bengal. I'm at Kolkata. We are at PLS Hospital, Kolkata. So the government of West Bengal was also sending directives, just like the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. And as state is the main custodian of health issues, we had to comply to state in West Bengal, because we faced regular audits by the government of West Bengal on mortality, morbidity, and we had to keep that data absolutely in place. And again, through emails, we had to send that data to the government. Any non-compliance was taken as a very, very serious non-compliance. We would also say that we participated in a lot of trials, and this was completely digitally enhanced trials. We participated in the ICMR NICID by BCG vaccine trial, and for the first time, I would say, the participants used the smartphones where the BCG vaccine was tried for evaluating its effectiveness against COVID-19. So that was a new experience altogether. We also were part of the Sputnik vaccine trial in Eastern India, and there also we have seen how digitally the trial data was put into the system, and how it helped the analysis as well as the approval of the Sputnik vaccine in the country. The other thing which was very unique was consenting of the patients, parties, and this is done like any other hospital, was totally done digitally. We recorded it, and as well as email consenting was done. Finally, as coming lastly to the infection control, I think we have learned a lot about infection control. In some of our very high-risk areas, we have used surface disinfectant materials to cover the doors and the surfaces, like dialysis and ICUs. These are expensive propositions, but we have done that. There are few Indian pharmaceutical companies which have brought in waterless disinfectants, and we have used them particularly in the ICU to reduce the infection. And lastly is IV infection control. We have shifted more into the closed kind of IV infusion systems, because we had less number of nurses. This was a major challenge. Managing the bundles was a major challenge. So we had to shift from the open to the closed system, though it incurred us cost, but we have been able to control the infection. So this is a nutshell from my end.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhaumik. That was really smart. Can Dr. Harish throw some more light on this before we move on to the second question?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Harish from Sudha Hospitals. So we have a 400-bedded hospital in Erode. So first, what we did was we isolated an entire block for COVID, and we segregated the rest of the part. And we had our infection control team, and they were actually shrewd enough to get into certain protocols. And the major thing that was positive for us was we didn't have any shortage of PPE materials or PPE masks. So we had abundant suppliers. So that was not an issue for us. The only one issue we had was the supply of oxygen. So even that we were able to materialize the oxygen. So we already have our liquid plant, and we were able to erect one more liquid plant in a span of 30 days. So it was already on the trot, so we were able to do it. And then, as one of our panelists already mentioned, we changed our punching system to face recognition. And we were able to install just movement doors, hand movement doors. All the doors were made electronic. So more of the infection was spreading through opening of the door and other. So these were made electronic, and only through hand signals they can just like that open the doors. All the doors were made automatic. And the same infection protocol. Everything was followed as per the norms, and I think all other things were already mentioned. That's what we followed, and the major things I have mentioned. That's it.
Thank you, Harish. Don't go away. I would request you to answer the second question first. We'll reverse the order of panelists in terms of answering this question. The second question that I have to put forth is, we all know the pandemic has definitely taught us one lesson: effective sterilization of medical devices to prevent pathogen transmission. What are your views on this?
See, what an innovation can be done, like you can have like a monitor like thing. Okay, this monitor, what it does is, if a clinical person, as a nurse or a doctor, wears it and goes near the machine, it will show the percentage of infection. Okay, so innovation, a monitor like thing is already in the research sector. If that is implemented, then it could be of more use to the hospitals. Just go and stand near the machine, it will tell the percentage of infection you have.
Right. Dr. Bhaumik, you have to add something to this?
Yes, I think I shouldn't sound very sarcastic, but let me tell you that whatever we could not teach in 20 years of infection control and 15 years of NABH accreditation program, Corona pandemic taught us in 1.5 years is that hand hygiene is so important. So when we now see the compliance
I
rise,
agree with you. I absolutely agree with you.
so I think people are doing it more to save themselves than to save the patients. I'm sorry for being so sarcastic, but absolutely, I mean, innovations have come in and have come from India. So being an Indian, I'm very proud. And the innovations have come from the medical devices. We have monitors. Apart from that, ventilators. We have ventilators which have been, we did, when the pandemic started, there were speculations that India will run out of ventilators, but we have innovations coming in from the, I would say, our own indigenously built ventilators. If you look at the infection control mechanism, infection control industry as a whole also, there are a lot of, I would say, the market is now totally filled with sanitizers, but the question is which one is the best? I think a lot of quality control has to be in place. There have been innovations which have been made in terms of surface coverings, which we need to understand what is the literature in and against it. Also, whole body sanitization. There would be, people entering the hospitals. They have been made. There are a lot of entrants where you have people totally getting drenched in the hypochlorite solutions which come through in a gaseous manner. So the literature is very clear on this, that it does not help. But people have spent lakhs and lakhs of rupees on that. I mean, we need to do analysis and we need to look at literature, medical literature, to understand before we kind of invest on this. So innovations have come, but let me add to this that innovations without any proper evidence-based medical literature has no meaning. That has to be evaluated, and that is one of the one of the major challenges currently in India.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Dr. Mohapatra,
And sorry for the interruption. I would like to add one more thing.
Yeah.
And we also set up a spraying sodium hypochlorite solution we did. That is, when the doctors or staff nurses, when they come out with the PPE, we had a shower-like thing that would spray the sodium hypochlorite solution. So that will wash off first, and then to the next room they have to come, and then they have to remove the PPE.
Right. Dr. Mohapatra?
Yeah, so as far as the sterilization or the disinfection of these offices, I think coming fast to the sterilization, I think nothing has changed as far as COVID is concerned. The sterilization of the equipments and medical instruments remains the same because the principle remains the same. So Yeah, means you can innovate on the processes like scheduling your sterilizing of the equipment because the load increased. So you can have a multi-loader sort of an ETO where you can multiple shifts of loading equipments. So that is with regard to the effective sterilization of the equipments. With regard to the disinfection of these offices, yeah, there is a lot of innovations has come up because this is where you need to have an interface with the environment, and that actually plays a big role with regard to your effective sort of curtailing of the infection and transmission is concerned. So in that area, I think the literature is evolving fast. As I've said, in 2020 May, the interim report of WHO, they gave us the surface staying time of the virus at different surfaces, and what are the guidelines to disinfect those surfaces. Now means that time it was mostly droplet infection, and also there is a transmission through the surfaces. So it is a fomite-borne infection as well. But then of late, last 6 months, these things have changed, and now they are telling it's a airborne infection. So you need to reset your AHUs. You make to have more negative pressure isolations. You need to see how the internal milieu of your wards, your ICU, what is the ventilation there. So what is the crowding structure? So, with the highest level of evidence, you need to strategize. So, that most of the hospitals are doing. With regard to different innovation from the technology side, few of them are CE or FDA approved already, which are to be installed in a like a public transport, inside a large gathering in a hospital or these things, something like a nano wave, something like a ultraviolet radiation. So different technologies, some like ultrasonic waves, killing the microbes. So I don't think they have been utilized in a commercial way, or still in the healthcare provider side. A lot much of utilization has come up. But I would say the biggest change or the biggest attribute of COVID to the technology or to the healthcare practice side is the change of culture. So hand hygiene or hand wash or hand rub, which was there and which was evident for all the this cross infection inside the hospital, has become has again come to the center stage with the COVID context and all. So I think there is a sort of a complement of the technology innovation in the technology side, as well as in the operation side. So both things needs to match to deliver with the changing scenario. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Mahapatra. Dr. Dilip Rangarajan, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to say that even prior to COVID, our hand hygiene complaints of our doctors in the hospital is 100%. The hand hygiene complaints of other health workers is close to somewhere between 85 to 90%, and this is being monitored on a daily basis by ICN and CCTV camera on a daily basis. This has been going on for the last 10 years. But COVID actually has just brought forth the fact that it's very important. What we have been doing for the last 10 years has been more meaningful now during the COVID season. Now, the few challenges during the COVID season was that right from the seating of the patients in the OPD, in the consultation room, so disinfection of the furniture, using bleach to clean the furniture, all was protocolized. Like how many times a day it will be cleaned, all that. Of course, all our hemodialysis machines and the carts and the listing of the patient and the side tables which the patients use are always disinfected following every dialysis, irrespective of COVID or non-COVID. And this was continued. The surface of the machines are cleaned with Bacillol spray, and the side tables and the cart and the patient related clean with bleach after every dialysis is over, which is followed. The challenge was dialyzing the set of COVID patients. our dialysis, we have two dialysis units inside the ground floor. We had one COVID ward on the first floor and the COVID ward in the ground floor. The problem is the patients who were the first floor who needed dialysis had to be shifted to the ground floor where dialysis unit was there. So, of course, taking care to ensure that they were shifted the safe way, the lift has to be disinfected following that. All this were taken care of. And patients with COVID were segregated to a third shift in one of the units so that 3 or 4 COVID patients were dialyzed together. And then the whole dialysis unit was fumigated with Aerox after the dialysis is over so that to begin the next day with fresh with the non-COVID patients. These are some of the things that we followed. And of course, following any HIV patient or hepatitis B, the hemodialysis machine is internal disinfection with citrosterol solution. So following COVID dialysis, we were following citrosterol disinfection of the machine. Both the surface disinfection as well as the machine disinfections were very rigorously followed, and touch wood we not had any problems. And not but last but not the least, the BP apparatus that was used for checking for every patient after every use, the cups were rubbed with isopropyl alcohol, and then the oxygen jars, the humidifiers for every patient had to be sent on a daily basis for cleaning and of course for ETO sterilization, etc. There's a lot of talk now that probably the black fungus nuclear spreads more through these oxygen humidifiers than through any other source. We're not sure, but we just took precautions, made sure that all the materials that were used for the patients were appropriately disinfected. That is it from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Rangarajan. Can we have final word from Dr. B.R. Gupta, please, on this question?
Yeah. So now coming to medical devices, my previous guest has already told most of the important things, like Dr. Bhomik mentioned about quality controls. That's very, very important because a lot of companies have come as far as sanitizers, hand gloves are concerned. And a few of the companies, like in the newspaper, it was there around 3-4 months back that one of the person has been nabbed by the police because it was all fake. So quality controls are very, very important as far as this thing is concerned. Second most important thing in infection control, like we already CSSD, so that whenever we use ETO or sterilizers, so it has to be based on strict infection control guidelines. Like we have got a reuse policy also, and I also mentioned earlier, because as per NABH guidelines, if we follow that, if CSSD staff is aware that how many times equipment has to be reused, then OT staff must also be in sync with the CSSD staff. In that way, we try to take load during COVID time. As far as infection control practices are there, I just want to share 2-3 things which we did. Like we started using this barriers enclosure for intubation, especially at the time of intubation. So this was sort of a acrylic box which was placed near the head at the time of intubation so that aerosol spread can be minimized. Secondly, initially, like masks were introduced, and we are in NCR region, and incidentally Studs company which makes helmet for bike riders, that company is in the Faridabad, and we just gave them idea that can you make some face shield with help of PVC and elastic bands. And I'm happy to share that the next day Studs people were there in the hospital and they came with this face shield, and they supplied a lot of face shield to other hospitals also. Then of course government guidelines were changing, like reuse of N95 mask. That was as per CDC guideline how we have to reuse. Then ultraviolet irradiation, and in OPD doctors were using transparent PVC shields so that the contact can be patients can be avoided. Another important challenge based on infection control practices was training of healthcare worker, because as you know, during that time there is a lot of load on CSSD and infection control practices. So we were continuously doing training to all our healthcare workers and OT technicians, CSSD technician, that helped to take care of the thing. And as my other colleagues have already mentioned about hand hygiene compliance, so thanks to COVID during that time, the awareness as well as implementation of hand hygiene has increased considerably because everybody was thinking that it can affect any one of us. So that was another good factor for the control. And the last thing, equipments like especially bronchoscope, endoscopes, like we have divided equipments into two, three categories, whether it is critical, non-critical, or semi-critical. So based on infection control practices, we divided their disinfection in the same way, depending on the patient load. So all these things helped us to combat crisis for implementation of infection control. That's my take on the second question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gupta. I would pose the third and the last question for the day today, starting with you. The question is, what would you say is the way forward, keeping in mind future pandemic situations? And what are the
Yeah.
things that weren't working that you've seen? And how would you like to change that?
Okay.
Dr. Gupta, please.
So, okay, thank you. Coming to the last question, uh, it's on three, four things. Number one is appropriate behavior. I mean, whether still there are a lot of cases in Maharashtra and Kerala, cases are less in northern India, but still I think COVID appropriate behavior is the key that we should follow. And second, the vaccination. Like I'm happy that India has crossed around 60 crores vaccination, and I'm very proud that in our hospital we have around 6, 7 centers, and I'm happy to share 30th August, we have crossed more than 1.2 lakhs vaccination from our hospital. And we are providing from initial days, like Sputnik, we started the first time in NCR region. So we are giving all the three, Covishield, Covaxin, and Sputnik in all our centers. The way forward is concerned. And of course, we have already discussed about stringent infection control practices, whether it is CDC based or WHO based or Indian Hospital Infection Control Society. And I think the role of microbiologist, the role of infection control committee, the role of frontier workers in housekeeping, GDA, etc., that has considerably increased in last 1.5 years. Another important area is, like we know what are infection control practices, but continuous surveillance of those infection control practices is very, very important. Like Dr. Dilip also mentioned about high risk areas. So those should be very, very stringent, whether it is for dialysis, whether it is for critical care, for dialysis or cath lab or bronchoscopy room. So continuous surveillance based on the protocols, that's very, very important. And I think another boon in disguise that government has also come with so many guidelines, that Niti Aayog has come with a white paper about opportunities of public health surveillance in India. So that's a very good reference. Earlier, those papers were not there. So if we follow all these guidelines, that will be very, very good thing for way forward and infection control. And of course, another important part is to take care of oneself, whether it is immunity boosters, immunity dose, or I think COVID has taught us so many things, whether to use KADA or whether to use so many things like Indians, we are honey, shahad, or chawanprash, etc. So those things they were followed in the West. I mean, people were making a lot of money, but I am happy that now those things have come back to India in a traditional way. And I think if whatever our grandparents and forefathers have told, if we follow all those good things to increase our immunity and resistance, that will help very good way as a way forward for infection control. And last thing, data analytics. Like has taught us so many things as far as data is concerned. So first we should have a mechanism to capture the data, and if we have strong data analytics, so that will help us to take care of the action based on the data. So that's in my take on that as far as infection control is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Dr. Dilip?
Yes, I have quite a few points on this. One is space constraint. See, suddenly you're thrown out of gear telling that we'll have to isolate these patients. So we have general ward, we have special ward, we have ICU, hemodialysis, etc. It's a challenge trying to isolate a group of patients who need dialysis. For example, we had that major challenge because the ward is somewhere else, the dialysis unit is somewhere else. So it is a challenge, and then any pandemic like this, we'll have to be prepared for getting these places closer to the essential areas. Then other major thing during, especially the first pandemic, first wave, was staff adequacy. We found that each area we have designated so many staff, and then we suddenly find the staff just abscond and they stop coming for duty. Fear of getting COVID. At least in the second wave, most of them, all of them were vaccinated, so they were more courageous coming for duty. So we should, for any future pandemic, I think we should ensure that staff adequacy is there in every department, and even if 50% disappear, we should be able to continue doing our work. Other thing is financial preparedness. I'm sure most of the hospitals have gone into a serious rut, especially after the first wave, when we find that the inflow is very, very poor, but still we have to sustain the group of health workers and this one. So we should have a financial planning ahead for any eventualities like this. Of course, staff and public education. Despite putting up so many these things and screening patients at the entrance, they come inside and say, "Yeah, last 1 week I've been having fever." Though they're supposed to go to the emergency ward through a separate gate, the understanding seems to be poor despite so much of reiteration to them. I think public awareness has to be increased by us that any pandemic, they exposing themselves, their relatives, and the healthcare workers to serious infection. And one of the most important point I'd like to make is usage of drugs. We find left, right, and center steroids are being used and antibiotics are being used. And I think at least 25% of death due to in COVID season is probably because of multi-drug resistant bacteria and not COVID per se. People on ventilator, etc. So I think the hospitals have to get in a strict antibiotic policy and use of restricted antibiotic, because most of the multi-specialty hospitals I see multi-drug resistant bacteria, and this is the cause of death in a lot of patients. So judicious use of antibiotics, and I find people with not requiring oxygen at all. We see a lot of discharge summaries where patients are absolutely fine, but were overdosed with steroid for about 2 weeks or so. So all this has led down to a lot of VUCAs and poor control of sugar, etc. So these are a lot of learning points from both the mistakes from elsewhere and our own mistakes, and try to correct them and be ready in case, God forbid, we have another pandemic. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Dilip. Dr. Mohapatra, your views on this, please.
Yeah. So I would put it in very brief. I think the biggest learning from COVID would be the behavioral changes or the cultural changes. We need to take things more seriously, and we need to take things. We need to take ourselves seriously also. I think WHO gives a pandemic alert periodically, of which COVID was one. And so 3-4 years back, they had one pandemic alert about COVID, still exists. And I think we didn't work that way, formulating the vaccines or effective formulations of medications and these things. So we could have done this. Now Nipah virus has come only 2 decades back, and I think we didn't have anything in place as far as the Nipah virus is concerned in India. So we want it to be come to that level of epidemic where we need to concern. Then there is really no time. So even if you see for COVID, when MERS and SARS came few years back, and there are some vaccine centers in Texas which was making some platform for MERS. They stopped. The funding stopped in between. So if it would have been continued there at that time, then I think we would have one vaccine ready for this COVID also. So I think those learnings we need to have and carry with us. Then one things in the technology side is has come up is the sequencing. So which was not done much earlier. Means we have H1N1 with your genome drifting and shifting, but only we had one NIV, National Institute of Virology in Pune. Now we have this insect, lot of institutes doing this genomic coding, sequencing that is going to be a pattern. Now we need to have these surveillances in place for future, not for COVID, but all illnesses. Then we also learned how to identify index case and how to follow those index cases to get rid of the transmission or minimize the transmission or arrest the transmission. Last but not the least that I have touched upon is the vaccine. So more funding into the research for India. I think the best thing that happened is people are even the public, rest apart the government, even the public is now learned to give more emphasis on public health. So I think these are the key takeaways from COVID. And if we learn these lessons, these key lessons, we would be better prepared next time. Thank you.
Dr. Bhaumik, please.
Yeah, sir, I would just like to add to my previous panelists is that our approach has to become proactive than reactive. So the most important thing what we need to learn is that at a national level, the GDP still is just poor 1.5% to allotted to healthcare. So the mindset has to come from the policymaker that healthcare does not require 30,000 crore rupees when the pandemic hits, rather than assign that 30,000 crore rupees before a pandemic can hit. So it's a governmental policy which requires major change, that 15% of the GDP should be given to healthcare rather than assigning it to Rafales and other missiles. Secondly, I would say that what has been said by my previous speakers, I think the other important area is supply chain. The pandemic's first wave and the second wave has really pointed out that even at the major cities in India, the supply chain of drugs, vaccines, especially with drugs and oxygen, is very, very poor. So the supply chain has to be strengthened with respect to the supply management becomes very, very important. And this is an important take-home lesson, that we cannot rely on certain supply chain systems. We have to have, as we do drills. Sometimes we do drills in hospitals for fire, we do drills for code blue. We need to do supply chain management drills in disaster. This is never done. So maybe India needs to learn and hospitals needs to learn from this. I completely agree with Dr. Dilip that lot of patients died because of therapeutic misadventures. So the clinical audits must not only be done for NABH, it should become a national mandate and regulations in the country, which we have not been able to do. So I think the high time that clinical audits, prescription audits become the norm, and hospitals should be allowed to function based on the reports on what the audits throw. And finally, sir, looking at the healthcare manpower which we have in the country, none of the doctors, none of the nurses, none of the pharmacists is trained in disaster management because it is not there in our courses. Why we struggled is because we were never trained on this. So I think the NMC, the erstwhile MCI and now the NMC, should incorporate disaster management and infection control as a separate, I would say, as a separate subject for the upcoming nurses, for the upcoming doctors and the pharmacists, so that whenever we get hit by another pandemic, we don't have to struggle the way how we struggled this time. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dr. Harish, would you like to add something to this?
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, the main problem that happened with COVID was we didn't have an early virus detection, because it already, when it has spread throughout the world. So early detection was mainly missing over there. And we have to increase the number of researchers, as well as we need preparation techniques. How we are going to prepare a pandemic. Because when the last pandemic like that happened 100 years before, we need to have a written documents of how to face it again when it happens. And we have to continue to implement vaccines programs. And that vaccine program has to be in such a way that we need to find methodologies to find vaccines faster and implement it. And one more apart from that was main thing was the World Health Organization. The data were erratic. Once which they said, they objected the same in the next meeting. So repairing and augmentation of the World Health Organization should be done. And then see, diseases keep on coming. We cannot stop diseases from coming. We can do a pathogen surveillance. That has to be kept in mind every time. Pathogen surveillance has to be done so that we can track them and we can just stop them at the initial stage, and we can prevent the great havoc. And one more thing to see with every pandemics, in the last 100 years, there were two viruses a year spillover from animals to humans. This was mainly because of deforestation. So this is something like out of the medical way. This was mainly because of the zoonotic outbreak, and the cause was deforestation. So we reduce the deforestation. And the other thing, we have to have a logistics development, the data security. The logistics development we need to have. That's it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harish. Since we have about 10-12 minutes more, I would put an open question to all five of you. And the question is, do we have reason to be optimistic about the future of the pandemic global response? And what's giving you hope if that is so? And if not, what is it? It can be answered. Yeah, Dr. Gupta. Yeah, Dr. Gupta.
Number one, and secondly, whatever all panelists have, which can be like put into implementation, I think that should help. Yeah, that should help. And whatever take-home messages out of this COVID, whether it is in first wave or whether it was in relation to steroid use, deficiency of oxygen cylinder, etc. So I think if all those things are care, and now government is putting a policy that every hospital should have a oxygen plant, like those measures what Dr. Bhaumik has mentioned about policy makers combined collaborative way, if things are taken, I am positive for it.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Dilip?
I think for sort of a massive population and within inverted commas unruly behavior of a lot of people who don't follow rules, etc. I think we have done quite well with the first and second wave, despite so many deaths, etc. It could have been more if not handled properly. And it is optimistic to see that the response from the industry, from the healthcare workers, pharmaceutical industry has been excellent, and we wouldn't have had so many diagnostic kits which have come in, right from rapid diagnostic kits to various types of RT-PCR diagnostic kits, as well as vaccines in such a record time. I think we should really compliment the scientists and the industry for having brought. Dr. Harish mentioned that wanted much quicker vaccines, but I think this is one of the quickest vaccines that we have had for a disease. So it was compliment everyone, and I think probably this has sensitized us more. Hopefully, during our lifetime, if we have another pandemic, I think it would be probably better handled than how we did this. I think despite all the flaws, we have done quite well.
Thank you, Dr. Dilip. Anybody else? Dr.
Yeah,
Mahapatra wants to say something. Yeah. Sorry, go on. You're muted. Dr. Mahapatra, you're muted.
Yeah. So I agree with my earlier panelist, and we are doing reasonably well. We have done reasonably well, being such a populous country, and in the technology side, we are down the in comparison to the West and US, but we did significantly well in no time, and we could avoid a lot of mortality, though keeping in context our supply chain and other these things and the overall GDP attributed to the healthcare. But we can always learn this lesson for the future, and as I've said, we need to bring in that culture of learning where we learn to put the things that is learned in the past for the future perspectives. That's all.
Dr. Bhaumik and then Dr. Harish, please.
Very positive, because I think telemedicine talks about how many patients were saved in this country without even doctors reaching them physically. So this thing can be utilized for chronic diseases like tuberculosis, malaria, dengue in the tier 2, tier 3 city towns of the country where we don't have doctors. And I think this is going to really, really strengthen how we manage patients, not only COVID patients, but non-COVID patients. So I'm very positive that this particular pandemic has shown that we don't need to meet in person, don't need to see people in person. Sometimes, of course, people will disagree with me, if I talk to the clinicians, that they have to see the patients physically, but many of these patients in our villages who will never get to come to hospitals in the plum hospitals where we belong to, they can be saved, their lives can be saved, or they could be managed with the help of the telemedicine. And I congratulate the government of India, one of the pioneers for bringing the telemedicine guidelines. Even when the West was thinking of for it, the government of India actually brought it in March 2020. So we are really the movers and shakers in this world that way. And also, I congratulate the Indian pharmaceutical industry, where the biggest superpower in the world, their president asked for hydroxychloroquine from us. So I think we as Indians should be very proud that we manage this really well. And if time goes according to how the time is progressing, if we really believe in our strategies, we will become a superpower in a very short period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhaumik. Dr. Harish, last word from you before I wind up.
Actually, the government did well considering the population of India. The people's thing also, it plays a major role. They have to know their responsibility and they have to do it. The government did it better. So the thing is, we need to learn from it and actually make a documentation of it. So if you see the history, the pandemic has happened every 100 years. So I don't know who will be there for the next pandemic. So we need to make a record of everything, so that when people are going to face the next pandemic, they should know what they have already followed and done, and they have to keep themselves prepared for those pandemics.
I completely agree with you. So in the closing, I would like to thank all of you for an extremely insightful discussion. The pandemic, as you all said, has taught us a very tough lesson. In our country, 174 doctors, 116 nurses, and another 199 healthcare workers have died due to COVID-19. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros confirmed that at least 115,000 healthcare workers have died globally. Adversities like this sometimes offer the greatest teaching in life. We need to take these teachings very seriously and innovate. And Dr. Harish has said that we should keep a tab of that, so that we have something for the next time. Infection control practices have always been given a lot of importance in healthcare, with help of infection control committees, training protocols, and regular audits. But this pandemic has definitely taught us much more than that, and we know that there is a long way to go. We need to strengthen our existing systems and try to adopt technological advancements which will make us things going smoother and more efficient. Equipment sterilization played a very critical role in preventing spread of COVID-19, as we all know. So did touchless recognition softwares, data dashboards, point of care diagnostic tools, chatbots, digital contact tracing, fibroid sensors, etc. We had never seen these before. Digital technologies cannot operate in isolation and need to be an integrated part into the existing public healthcare systems. Awareness and acceptance are the way ahead. We need to remember that mucormycosis was always there and diabetics were more prone to this infection, but the focus came in the second wave with high risk population always being vaccinated. Vaccination, wearing a mask, and sanitization and disinfection need to be ingrained in our lives. Necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention, and we all have come up with some interesting innovations which are discussed during these sessions. And I'm very proud of all the speakers and their own experiences that they shared during last 1 hour 15 minutes. What we need to realize is that we have lost lives and paid a big price for these advancements. However, we human beings learn to adapt and move forward, and let's make the most of these new developments in healthcare and encourage these further. Thank you all for this great session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. We have another 3-4 minutes.
Yeah, someone wanted to make any comment? Okay, then thanks, Dr. Patkar. And I would like to thank all the panelists, Dr. Gupta, Dr. Rangarajan, Dr. Harish, as well as Dr. Bhaumik, for such wonderful insights in terms of, as Dr. Patkar rightly said, while the new developments have happened and we are moving, but we had paid a heavy price for that. But as we say, to go ahead further, we sincerely hope that some of these new developments will be beneficial, helpful for us in the near future. And the discussions and deliberations we had in this panel will be useful for about the 300 plus audience who are there. And they will be able to apply some of these practices in their healthcare facilities and institutions. So that will be the biggest benefit for everyone concerned. So thanks to all the panelists again for enriching the discussion at the second IPAC Health Tech Innovation Conclave, and wishing you all have a wonderful day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rakesh.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.